around and say your name and the emotion that you feel about Citizens United. So I'm Avi, and I feel a sense of kind of absurdist humor about it. Like it's so ridiculous that it's almost funny. So let's go this way.
I'm Mike.
It looks like there's plenty more space at Pam's table too, so if some folks haven't sat down yet, want to come sit with Pam, and we'll all hopefully get a reasonable amount of practice in. Thanks.
I'm Mike. I'm from Cambridge, and I considered money in politics to be the #1 issue prior to Citizens United. So I, don't even know what to think about Citizens United. It's just more of the same mess.
I'm Andy, but I might try to keep the groups.
Do you want to go over to Pam?
Yes.
Pam's a good woman. That's very kind of you. It's cool.
Susan the Bunny Bar. I'm an environmental activist, and just recently came to the conclusion that you can't get anywhere if politics is corrupt country.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm Teresa, and I guess alarmed probably be the best thing.
I'm Ellen Fine, and I guess I would be like quietly pissed and laughing.
And can you tell me why you feel you're quietly pissed and laughing?
Because it explains the shit that I've gone through for all these years. And the laughing is because like I'm on to it now.
And can you just say a little more about what, like, without taking too much time, what that specific shit is, or some of that specific shit?
Being poisoned by pesticides and having George Bush's former chief of staff in my hometown as a comedy campaign, speaking out up against me, fucking up my law and shit that I worked so hard on the homeless stuff.
Wow. Okay. That's
It's real shit.
yeah. Good to hear. Good to hear.
Just to tell it out there.
No. Really good to hear. Really good to hear. Really important to hear.
Really, my name's Brianna, and I don't feel that I have
Okay.
Dimitri Goodnev.
What?
I knew that was going to happen. Especially if you look at the.
So I think you're speaking to your city council, whoever represents your area, or...
I'd say 4 of the judges were they've always been
So
very
that's a good
much
place to start. So,
protection of speech.
do you want to take a shot at it? So who would you be talking to? And
Yeah. Very corporate Supreme Court.
Julie LaPoole from the Coffee Party. Citizens United, it's a particular act which was so extreme that it finally galvanized a lot of popular opinion around these issues. It's an opportunity to have a discussion about a lot of issues which go beyond citizens.
I'm going to have you do a
And that we need to be very alert in lobbying, I think, to what different legislators are bringing to the conversation around the issues.
Does somebody have a timer?
Unifying people.
Anybody have a timer on their phone? I don't have it. My phone's too old to have it stop.
I'm Alice, and I'm a college student.
You want to do that?
I guess I feel that Citizens United is very much rebellion in the sense that it's manipulating like the start, and then it's very 2 + 2 = 5. So,
Hi.
How are you? Just the fact that so many of my work is
I'm Suzanne. I'm from Dedham. I come from a social justice, church environmentalist background, and the very day that Citizens United was announced, I completely switched priorities. I didn't walk away from the other concerns, but they got put into an entirely new, bigger bubble. And I think that's why I have found it particularly frustrating, because I come from a point of view of the dots were already connected. For me, they connected themselves, okay? And so I really just sort of assumed that everybody else would get. That part of it felt Orwellian to me, so there's really a progressive part of it that feels Orwellian to me too, because, I would get these fundraising calls from environmental groups, okay? And, letters from sojourners and stuff saying, where are you? What happened to you? How come you haven't been in our meetings for so long, from church people? And I'm like, why aren't you at the coffee party, the common cause. Why aren't you, I don't see any of you guys at these meetings. Where are the environmentalists? Where are the social justice people? You know, they're at the party now. They're at every table now, but it took a little bit too long. It was a little bit too frustrating. I know you know, what do pesticides have to do with good government?
Nothing.
Did you watch PBS the night they announced Citizens? It's a whole new world. Did you get the memo? It's a whole new world. So all of you other people that have been doing this all your lives, well, now you're going to do it from this perspective. You're not going to stop doing that other stuff. But the grid is different.
So, you know, what we just did actually would be a very good example of how you might, if you brought a group, start a conversation with the legislator by having everyone introduce themselves and start from a perspective of the calm expression of emotion, right? No, you were good. You were good. You were fine. You were absolutely fine. I'm not talking, I mean, we're not trying to be machines.
I would use different words.
Right? Yeah, of course. But, you know, you would have had enough people if you were visiting a state rep or a state senator or a member of Congress for them to like realize this many people is a pressure group when they come, right? It's not a conversation, right? If it was just, you know, the two of you, Mike and Brianna, then I'd be like, well, that's a conversation that I can have as a legislature. But this is a group that's already decided on its opinion, and what you're coming to do is to convince me, right? I would suggest a couple of things, a couple of tools that you can use in your resume, right, or your repertoire, when you go and visit with people, right? When you visit an elected official. The first is personal story, right? So I forgot your name. Ellen. Ellen had a really powerful personal story, which you just began to touch on the edges of the story. I'm sure it's much bigger. But one of the things to figure out about, you know, is how to use that story, right? We each have stories, right? The reasons why we're political. And think back, why am I here? What made me decide, right? There are plenty of people who are just watching a baseball game today, or a football game, or some sort of game, right? Or whatever, right? That's true. Or they're just shoveling snow, or sleeping, or watching a movie, right? You chose to be here, and it's because something makes you mad or frustrated. And when you share that conversation with other people, right, that power of story is very effective. Second thing to consider with elected officials, right, is the possibility of exchange. So you have things you want and things to offer. You have interests and resources, right? So your interest, right, in this case, is you want the elected official to take specific action. And by the way, if you like are planning to live someplace for a while, and you think of yourself as an activist, it's a good idea to visit your elected official at some point when you're not sure what your specific thing is, and just to go and get to know them and say, like, I'm just an activist in our community. I'm sure I'm going to be coming back to you, but I'd like to, you know, I'd like to just hear what you're about, because that way when you come back to them, right, you're gonna, and you're gonna have a little sense of where they're at, and you know, so if you say to them, well, like, what are you? So because when the crisis hits, and you're like, I need your name on this letter to the Speaker of our House saying we need to vote on this right now. You know, it would have helped me, right, if we'd had a conversation and I knew what you were about. But you know, you can't always have that.
Well, wouldn't it be better to actually go to a few of their fundraisers and hang out with them?
It depends. There's nothing wrong with it, and certainly can happen. It depends on what personally works for you. I mean, if you have some money and plan on giving it, right, then you can certainly go to a fundraiser. On the other hand, right, if you don't know the person to the extent that you feel good about giving them money, I wouldn't go to their fundraiser to protest unless you specifically feel like you can't work with this person at all, and the way that you want your relationship with them to be is based always on conflict. Because your first impression, and in some cases, some of these folks are jerks, and that's the way it should be. That from the beginning, you just have to fight them from end to end. But if they are absolutely fine with a good number of their meetings with people being meetings that are not fundraisers and not protests, like they're not at the stage that you want something. But if you like have read something about somebody like Mike Capuano or whatever, and you feel like, well, he's he's pretty much where I want. He's not exactly, but I feel good about giving money. You know, more power to you. But I would not encourage you to give money when you're not sure. That's the devil's path to hell, right? Because you'll feel bad about it, and you'll feel like, well, did I just try to be part of this corrupt system I'm trying to fix? Yeah. So anyway, so you go and visit. Before I come to you, I just want to say one other thing. And then you've got these things you're going to want, something specific from the legislature. And you're going to have things that so then the other thing is, you should have something that you're going to offer. Now, it doesn't need to always be money, right? In fact, most of the time, ideally, it should not be money. We'd really like to take a picture with you for our newsletter about how you're helping us out. You know, I'm going to send you a thank you note after we met, right? Thanks for taking the time. We have an email list with 75 people on it, and I want to tell them how great our meeting was. Can we write an op-ed together for the local paper, or a letter to the editor about why you're supporting this? Or if they did something great, you write a letter to the editor like, well, so-and-so stood up and co-sponsored our Citizens United Constitutional Amendment. You write a letter to, in your case, maybe the Cambridge Chronicle, or I'm going to blog about our meeting on Blue Mass Group, and I want to say some good things about you. You know, stuff like that. So they also have these interests and these resources. They have, in this case, the ability to help you get what you want from the legislature. But you have to also know what their interests are. So the other thing I would suggest that's very worthwhile ahead of time is Googling the person that you're going to visit, and also asking someone who might really know them. You know, you met me. I'm Avi. I work at MassVote. It's massvote.org, and my email's right there. If you're going to go visit an elected official in Massachusetts, and you want to know if I know them and whether I think that they're a good person or a bad person, whether they're obsessed with youth sports or love election laws or whatever, I have some knowledge of that for most of them. Pam, for example, knows them all. So that's something. Anyway, what I'd like to do now is I want to come back to you, and then I want to just have us all. We're just going to practice very, very quickly, as if I was a state representative and you wanted me to sign a public letter to Congress saying it's time to overturn Citizens United and work on the state, and you wanted me to co-sponsor the state resolution on, to overturn Citizens United with it. And you're just going to say, we're just going to meet, and you're going to say what comes up. But you want to say
Yeah. A lot of towns have their own open blog. All towns have their own website. But in addition to that, there are all kinds of alternative journalists out there that do local town blogs, open blogs. And you know how I found out that my town of Dedham has one? I walk to work, okay? I have to cross a bridge over the Charles River. I have no choice. It's the only way for me to get to work. And one day in winter, because they don't shovel the sidewalk, but they do plow the road, and the snow goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up. And one day, I almost got tossed over the guardrail and into the Charles River. It terrified me, and so I decided I need to fix this. So I started doing some research online, and I found the town website, which actually I'd already been on, and I found mydedham.org. And it's an open blog, and I got guidance, I got support, I got mocked, which was kind of fun because you could see from before that I like to mock back. And I went to a couple of town meetings, and I got the problem solved, or at least half solved. They now faithfully shovel the sidewalk on one side. And when they don't, they get plenty of emails, because all I have to go do is get on that open blog and pull up that entry of mine and add a reply, and all of a sudden there's a half dozen other replies. And I've noticed, I don't know if it has only to do with me, there's a couple of other really active people, but now there's a JM on there, and he's one of our town directors, I happen to know. And he is a member and a participant, a very active one, and he has come out since then, so we verified. So we know we've got one of our town directors working on the blog. So it's got to be really, really friendly and conversational, and it fixes the problem.
So what you said is absolutely right. I mean, people like that, there's this thing called, I think it's Revere Online, for example, and Kathy Reinstein is the state representative from Revere. And I went to visit her to talk about something totally different, and she was like, really upset. She's like, you'll never believe what they're saying about me on Revere.com. It's like, Revere.com? Who reads Revere.com? She does. Right?
So do her constituents.
And right, or at least the kinds of constituents. Right? In Revere, I'll tell you what, and in Dedham, most people in Dedham don't read my Dedham, but enough of them do. And those who do are the same kind of folks who come to meetings, and the same kind of people who vote, and even the same kind of people who work on volunteering campaigns, that sort of thing. So I'm going to be State Representative Byron Rushing from the South End. You all are my constituents. I'm going to come in, and you guys are going to tell me why I need to get involved with the Citizens United thing. And I think what you should do is you should choose someone who's going to MC the meeting and like tell me, make sure that everybody talks and stuff like that. I'm going to come back.
I think that's what he means by that.
Yeah, like, this is Teresa, and she's really concerned about.
So do you want to do that? Does anybody want to do that? All right.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm sorry that you guys had to wait. It's just been a really busy day at the legislature, but what brings you here? It's nice to have you all. Hi, Byron Rushing. Really nice to meet you, too.
We are exclusively concerned about the Citizens United.
You're like Citizens United, about Citizens United. Very good, very good.
We are very concerned for a few personal about the effects of this case, the local organization. We would like to get
I'm sorry, I've been working on education stuff. What is this? Remind me? I'm sure I know what this is.
It's
But.
a Supreme Court case two years ago. You may have heard a lot about super PACs.
Oh, yes.
The ones that
The corporate money.
Yes, the ones that allow.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We are trying to get more support along with our own in overturning.
Well, how can you overturn it? 'Cause, I mean, it's a Supreme Court decision. I mean, don't you need just another Supreme Court decision?
No, you can also overturn it with an amendment.
Well, right, but that's a federal amendment. I mean, I'm just a state
I'm
legislator.
sure you're familiar with the women's right to vote.
Sure, yeah, of
How,
course.
so many states had to sort of sign on to that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out with the ERA. But citizens, not just us, but a lot of other people in a lot of other towns are going to the local reps. And we're asking local reps to help us bring these issues to the federal level. So somebody else has to jump in and explain that.
We realize that you are on the education committee. We're coming to you as your constituents because we live in your district.
Yeah,
Okay?
right.
So we want to make sure that you know that there is a bill pending. It's Senate 772. You've heard of it. That's
Yeah,
okay. That's great.
772.
Well, we've been working and lobbying to get a hearing date, and now there is one. It's going to be on February 28th, and you may not be able to attend the hearing or testify. We're not necessarily. It's on February 28th, which is a Tuesday. It's going to be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, thank you so much.
But if you're not able to be there and testify, we definitely would at least like to get you a pledge that you support 772. It's simply the state of Massachusetts asking Congress to file legislation for an amendment.
And so I'd like to ask you, do you support this amendment, or what are your thoughts on Citizens United?
Well, I think that I do support this. I mean, I haven't taken a public stand on it yet, but I really share a lot of the feelings that you have. I mean, my concern is that, I run my own campaign, and I'm planning my campaign for re-election for the 17th time, and I feel that what really worries me is the idea of some company in my district or outside of my district that wants me out, just running anonymous ads against me. Or even if you want to support me, I don't want to have somebody who's not associated with me telling people why they should vote for Byron Rushing. I want to control my campaign. I want my opponents to control their campaigns. I want there to be that kind of accountability.
And I'd like to speak to that.
Always been examples, and one of them.
A lot of people feel as if Citizens United has to do with the federal level, that the reach of special funds to money is already being fueled. We saw it in the case of Coakley versus Brown. Regardless if we won, we were in a civilized until all this special interest money on the left and right came in and deluged the airways with negative messages. The candidates lost control of their messages. And the voters, the people of Massachusetts were told.
Yeah, well, I suppose the third parties are very, very negative.
Over 30
The corporations
were
are very
spent on 6 state senator recall campaigns in Wisconsin.
It's starting to move along.
So it does touch home.
What exactly would you like me to do? I mean, I don't have that much ability to help as a member of the education committee, but what specifically would you?
First of all, we wanted to show you this petition of these 12,000 people in this district who we thought felt really strongly about this issue. And we also have this other great picture, this event that we had at about 3 of the local elementary schools with kids debating about this issue.
Oh,
You can
nice.
see
Yeah.
the great pictures of the kids and
Yeah.
some of the city council folks who were there with us
Oh,
that
yeah,
day.
yeah.
And so you can see it's an issue that's affecting a lot of people. These kids are starting to think about their future. And so I think what we'd like you to do, and I'll let somebody else pick up on this, is we would certainly like you to support this, but come up with strong support. So maybe we could co-author an op-ed in the Boston Globe together, or maybe appear on one of the local radio shows together. And we really, you've been such a strong voice in the State House for so long. We really would love to have you on board with this, but in a really strong way, in a public way. So if Mike or somebody else...
School board members are elected also, okay, so that's campaign funds even at the basic level. Teachers are hired and fired, they're trained, they go to schools here in the state. Maybe we could, come back with some school board members that support this issue, with some school teachers that realize how they're affected. I'm sure they'd be happy to do that.
Sure.
From the student level, I personally actually attend this university
Oh, yeah.
personally, and I know
Great
there's
school.
lots of different. I have a radio show. We could always we'd love to have you talk about.
Well, you know, I don't usually do this within a meeting, but I think I'm willing to say that I'm convinced. And I'd be happy to. I don't know whether or not I'd be able to do a radio show, but why don't you talk with my assistant Blake about your schedule, and we'll see if that's possible.
You could pick your own favorite pop song. Like you could come in there with your top 5 songs. Because I know this is what these guys do on the show. They let the guest speaker come in and pick their favorite songs.
Oh, nice.
Kind of work into issues along
Well, it would probably
with
be a
that.
little bit old school then.
Oh, old school's good. Jazz, whatever.
Yeah, but that sounds great. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah.
Thank you for seeing us.
Yeah. So I thought that you guys did a very, a really fine job. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Let's debrief where we're
I was wondering whether it might couple what I wanted to was that to what extent do you think you feel vulnerable, as an elected official, to just you actually said something you really pick up on, which was that what if a big corporation comes in at the last minute and advertises heavily against my re-election campaign, and maybe what we should have said is that as part of this process, we're really committed to, the candidates are working with us to expose if corporate money does come against you, that we would use our resources to make sure that everybody knew where those processes are.
Yeah, and tell me your name again.
Susan.
Susan makes a good point, just generally, which is also. This is like really fundamental and obvious, except that we're constantly forgetting it because we feel our own feelings so intensely. Where does persuasion occur? It occurs in the head of the person you want to persuade, not in your head. So you really want to be asking them questions to figure out what is the thing that's going to persuade them. And the notion for an elected official, right, that some corporation can come in totally anonymously at the end of the campaign, and there will never be an official record of of why they spent this money or who they were. it's very intimidating. And it's intimidating, the notion that, that when the lobbyist for Verizon comes to visit me next time, and the state is thinking about whether or not to tax the telephone poles, which are which are leased to Verizon, that this guy, if he thinks that I wasn't there for him, can call down $100,000 worth of mail at me, and I won't even know. But when he says there'll be consequences, it's really they can be very threatening. Another factor that I would use in Massachusetts, and we'll send this out to the occupant list, is public opinion on this.
The 12 sides.
Yeah, not just the petition signature. Petition signatures definitely, but also last year, MassVote asked the Suffolk poll to ask about Citizens United, and in Massachusetts, those numbers a year ago were that 80% of the people in Massachusetts opposed the Citizens United decision. So that means everybody. And that means Tea Party people oppose it, super liberals oppose it, moderates oppose it, everybody. It's 82% of folks think that the Citizens United decision was a mistake, and I think those numbers are probably going up since then.
Can I ask just a question about how this really goes down? Because I haven't really tried yet. I get the feeling that if I ask just a random sampling of people on the street, that half of them wouldn't know what Citizens United was.
Well, the way that the question was asked is, the Supreme Court recently made a decision, recently made a decision that allows corporations to spend unlimited sums to elect or defeat the candidates of their choice. Do you think that do you support or oppose this decision? That was the exact question, as opposed to and that's an important point as well. And it was important with the beginning of the meeting, which is and this is so key for me as someone who cares about election laws. I am constantly in danger of using jargon. And Citizens United is kind of jargon. Whereas, the Supreme Court said corporations can spend unlimited amounts. And even, referencing popular culture. Have you seen the stuff that Stephen Colbert is doing? Or someone mentioned the super PACs going back and forth and how they really screwed up the Republican primary. Can you imagine that happening locally? It's coming. So I really think that you guys are great. The other thing that I would say is, I would suggest that it's always worth getting an initial read with a group that's smaller than this, either a phone call or just a one-on-one visit, or two-on-ones, and then you determine where do you stand? Do you need to bring a full delegation? Do they need, what does it take? But I really think that it's possible to get this resolution through the State House this year, and then if folks chose their own. If we adopted different legislators by different people, we could get it done.
I think it might have been helpful, if we had 2 minutes to prepare, would be a little, diagram showing, how it's going to phase out. We get the state reps to vote, and then it goes like this, and then it goes into the tier, the federal. So if we say, this is what we use when we're talking to groups of people. Maybe it's helpful in explaining this. If your normal issue is education.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't deal very often with constitutional amendments.
Exactly.
So just to say, what happens is the state passes a resolution. It's a formal letter to Congress saying that they need to do this. When enough states do that, Congress will act. And then once Congress acts, it comes back to the states, and then it becomes part of the.
That's what I was trying to do.
Yeah,
I started talking about the voting.
Let's go, Susan, and then you.
General question about how best to effectively lobby. You mentioned small groups versus large groups. Is it better to try to get small groups of people to go one by one rather than just tromp into the office with 10 people?
It depends. I generally think that for each person in the legislature, and we would hope to be very involved in this over the course of the spring, as a coalition. But the best way to do S772, if you ask me, is you create a Google document with every state senator and every state representative in Massachusetts, and then ideally one person signs up to be the coordinator of dealing with Byron Rushing. So Mike just takes me. I am the coordinator of Byron. I meet with him once, and then I assign him a sense of how is he? Is he with us? And there's a column in there. Yeah, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe a 1 is they just love this bill. They already co-sponsored it. They're down with us. 2 is they're with us. They're leaning towards us. 3 is they're and you code them, and then you decide what to do based on that code, right? So if they're a 1, then at that point, like they're really with us, then it's time to like say like, well, what I'd really like to do is come in and shoot a little YouTube with you and write that op-ed, put you up on the blog, celebrate how awesome you are. If you're like a 2 and you're leaning in favor, you know, maybe what I need to do is get 40 or 50 people to email you and then call up and be like, so you were leaning in favor, you know, I know a bunch of people in your neighborhood emailed you, you know, can we now add you to the official list? And they'll probably be like, yeah. If they were undecided, then, you know, you probably need to start bringing larger groups, right? And having different people come. And a group like this can be really, really effective. And part of that is having that first meeting with them. You might get a sense, like, do you think this is someone who'd be intimidated by a large group? Would it be better to bring a few groups? When you Google them, you know, like when you Google them, for example, maybe there's someone who, like, it just says, like, labor, 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 labor all over their stuff. Well, the Mass Nurses Association is part of this coalition, so they would be the good person to go get them. And then at the bottom end, right, if they're leaning away, you might work on them, but I'd work on the undecideds first. And if they're absolutely positively against you, generally what I do at first, at least with this, is just ignore them. Because what you don't want to do is take someone who's a little bit, like who's definitely against you, and slap them across the face where they then decide, like, every day, my goal for this year is to defeat this legislation. Right? Now, there are some, like, if you already have people who are like that, then you have to destroy them. You have to protest in their, you have to run someone and beat them. You have to have protests in their district. It's really a pain. Much more, because what you do not want is with the Senate President and the Speaker of the State House for Representative so-and-so to go in and be, and Bob DeLeo, you know, the Speaker of the Massachusetts State House, has a meeting once a year with every rep. It's like, what do you need in the budget, and what do you need generally? And they get to say like 3 things. And what you do not want is for anyone to say like, one of the 3 things I need is for S772 to not move. I hate those people, right? Because then they've been like, well, this is the #1 priority is your legislation not to move. You really don't want to get that. You know, with really, really good issues, it does happen because there are, you know, because evil exists.
Would you say this is a mobilization?
I would say yes. I would say it's definitely. I would say that there's enough people. Well, first of all, I would say there's tons of people in Massachusetts who think this decision was wrong, and they don't need to be persuaded it was wrong. They need to be persuaded to take action. They need to be mobilized. And if those people were mobilized to call or visit their legislators, and they might do emails as a way to basically to commit themselves. It really doesn't do that much, but it commits them, and then you can move them up the leadership ladder towards calls and visits. That's how you get there. I don't think you have to. I mean, given that 80% decision was a mistake, I don't think you need to persuade one person. In the legislature, you probably do need to. There will be people who will say this. You can't change the Constitution. It was created by the founders, the founding fathers, miss. And you'll be like, oh.
And women couldn't even vote back then.
Right.
This is how it should be
One
still.
wrote in Article 5 that
Right.
says they want us to do this.
And did it 27 times. But there are the ones who like hold it up like it was holy. You wanted to say something.
I wanted to ask a question, sort of, it's multifaceted. How often would a Verizon lobbyist go see a rep? Is it like...
Oh, it's real interesting. So I have a funny story about the Verizon lobbyist. So, you know, so I work on election laws all this time. I'm really blessed in that I work at a small organization where I get to do nothing but election laws all year long. And there was a new guy who had just become the chair of the election laws committee in the State House. So he was going to be the state senator who was responsible for elections. This is not the current chair. It's years ago. And so I go in, I really work to get this meeting with him, you know, to meet him up and everything like that. And I go in, and they're like, oh, he's busy, you can meet with the staff. So I'm meeting with the staff, you know, telling them all the election laws things I care about, fixing registration, campaign money. And then this guy in like a nice suit like pops his head in the door, and it's like, oh, you know, can I go speak to Senator so-and-so? And they're like, oh, who are you? And they're like, he's like, oh yeah, or no, they didn't say that. They're like, Jim, who are you representing? Like they already knew his name, but they were like, who are you representing today? He goes, oh, Verizon. they like poke their head around into the inner sanctum, which I had not been allowed into, like the inner room where the senator actually was, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he'll see you right away." And like the guy didn't even do telecommunications. Oh, it really bothered me.
So the reason I asked that is because I used to be a drug rep, and I saw that happen as a rep all the time. I see lobbyists really being insane in a lot of ways. So as citizens, how often should this be like a one-time thing, or if we have something, do we make repeated visits even after we've had this initial
Repeated visits are key.
Oh, really?
Repeated visits are key. Yes, it really depends, but it depends. Like for some people at some part of this coalition, repeated visits will be important for sure. In some cases, there'll just be a rep or two that you need to get signed on, but there'll be other people who will become leaders in the campaign within the legislature. Not just Jamie Eldridge, the lead sponsor, but you'll be trying to get 5 or 10 reps who'll be like your whips, who'll be like working their other members, and you'll need to go in more than once. Yes, sometimes it is worth. Thanks so much for coming. You know, really a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
At what point do you just annoying them, or you try to send different people? Or
Different people is great. You have to take a read on it. It may be that well, it really depends, right? I mean, I would say this. If you meet with them and you try to convince them of something and they're not convinced, you should not be the next person who talks to them. On the other hand, if you meet with someone and they are convinced, but you need more, then you should definitely go back. You know, they signed up, but now you need them to talk to leadership, or you need them to help you get a meeting with the State House Speaker, because you can't get that by yourself, but you want them to take you or something, or you want them to sign a public letter, an op-ed, then you would go back. But if they're not convinced, you don't go back. You send other people, at least for a while.
should we look at where they're getting their campaign contributions?
It's useful. It's useful to look at where they get their campaign contributions, but I would say not at the first level. The first level, I would try to arrange one-on-one meetings with as many people in the State House as possible, with just 15 minutes of Googling them before you go, without the deep research. Just what do they say that they're about, and that's enough. And just go, go with that. Get an initial read, an initial persuade. And then if they're really like thorny, undecided, a pain in the butt for some reason, then I would do deeper research. But a lot of people, given that you can say 80% of the people in Massachusetts are in favor of this thing, it costs nothing for them to do it. It protects their own campaign. A lot of them would be willing to be at least reasonably sympathetic to the first job.
That's the other thing that we really have in our favor. Like I know in Needham we're working really hard on this, and we have an amazing relationship
She's the
I say
new
amazing relationship, and I can never pronounce her name right.
She's the new state rep.
Yeah, and she was just like, she was a selectman before. Perfect. So, I mean, to go to if you're from the town, to get your people on board is really important as you're trying to do the town thing, and they'll often have a little bit of interplay with the state. They'll often say they're separated, but I think it's another way to get it. Oh, we have, 3 of the 5 selectmen on board, that kind of thing.
So I want to ask you guys a story inventory question for what we have left, the time we have left. A really useful story to use in almost any lobbying meeting. It's a little off topic, but it's useful for anything. Is to think about the very first time in your life that something happened that politicized you even a little bit. Whether it was, like my coworker, Cheryl, her father took her to march with Martin Luther King. She was like 6. Or for me, my parents, used to sit around at the dinner table and talk about how they hated race. But or it could be something very much more specific. Like a friend of mine got asbestos, whatever it could be, right? A nice thing to do as part of these meetings to humanize yourself is to start by saying I'm Avi, and I've really cared about politics ever since blah, blah, blah. And now I'm really upset about this. So you can start with this little story about you that humanizes you. So take a moment and think about what is that little story. And maybe we'll just turn in twos to two, two, you and me are in two. Or maybe actually if Sarah jumps in, then it's an even number. And we'll just exchange that story, that practice with each other. So you want to think, and because it's great, those are really useful because they form a little bit of a relationship. We'll take like 2 minutes each to just sort of introduce each other by thinking about like the politicizing things that we do. Actually, Judy.
Teresa.
Oh, you did?
What's your last name? She knows my story.
Oh, then we should switch. Wait a minute.
Trying to
Yeah, how about you? Yeah, Judy, can you be with Sarah and Ellen with
Suzanne and Deb. Got it.
all right, Nina, you can take
Oh, I'm on a lot of lists. Teresa, I'll give
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like,
I'm just gonna check our time.
I'm sorry, all I have is a deadhead.
yeah, that is really good. Yeah, December time.
I'm on that one too, but I don't.
Yes, I will give you time in this.
So obvious the first time.
Go ahead. So you want to personalize your? But you don't have to do exactly. His idea. That was just an idea. It doesn't have to be one.
What's really
I've always had to politics, but have I?
but it was
No, I've just I've always had an interest in politics, and what got me motivated to start researching it. This was when I had. Hi. I don't like to start with I'm not, whatever, the perception.
See, that's not going to work.
Yeah, so I'm like, trying to, actually, I've always. You guys pretty well done? Almost, we've, I've always had an interest in politics, and when I was working as a pharmaceutical rep, where I started how politics impacted healthcare. Yeah, really delved deep into how medications are chosen and all medications, but how they're
All right, guys, we got about 5 minutes, and we'll wrap up.
really been studying
30 more seconds and then
yeah, we're talking about that's why I'm here today. And I yeah.
So if you haven't switched yet, you have about 30 more seconds.
And what I used to, I wear a lot of hats, but the hat that I wear most of the day is business owner. I work in South Boston, and so that's exactly where I that I've always believed most of my action is just on working to make the world a better place by actually doing things like creating a neighborhood, like cleaning up a beach, like becoming a